What's up, everybody? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have an album review for you. So another one I think that was probably pretty anticipated that was coming out the week of the 15th of July was the newest offering from Inhuman Condition, Fearsick. Again, this comes out on the 15th of July on, well, multiple record labels. We have Listenable Insanity Records, Season of Mist, and Rapture Records all putting out like their different versions of it. So it's kind of a multi-label release. So there's a lot of different formats to actually find this on. This band formed in 2020 in Florida. This is essentially the lineup that was going to be on the last Massacre album, but you know, there were some issues there. And the members that exited this project, namely Terry Butler, Taylor Nordberg, and Jermaine King, all ended up forming this project. Now this is their second album overall. I was a big fan of their debut album, Rat God. It was just a good old school trip back into like early 80s, late 90s death metal, thrash metal, a little bit of hardcore. It was a fun fucking listen. And honestly, I was kind of surprised that this came out so soon because all these members are very busy. Terry Butler, of course, in Obituary. He's also doing Left to Die right now, which is a cool tribute to death. Taylor Nordberg recently got the nod to be the new lead guitarist in Deicide. We actually saw him in MDF, and he is a fucking great fit. And both he and Jermaine King are also members of The Absence and Rib Spreader, which both are prolific in their own right. Now, much like Rat God, this is some no frills, no bullshit, old school death metal mixed with old school thrash metal and like a little bit of hardcore. It stays fiercely latched on to, again, that late 80s, early 90s sound. The only thing modern about this album, I would say, is the production. The production, well, it's good, but it's also kind of dry. It's a little stripped down too much just in terms of like, I don't know, it feels a little bit sterile, especially, you know, considering the era they're going for where production was notably a bit more gritty. But the music itself is right in line with all that. You have giant grooves, very akin to, again, Obituary, I would say Bolt Thrower. I mean, there's definitely a lot of stuff that reminds me of Massacre as well. Jungle Rot, I would say, is definitely in the mix there, but you also have thrash metal that is very akin to, I would say, like Power Trip or Enforced, but also like that sort of death thrash style you heard in early Sepultura as well. The opening track, The Mold Testament, opens up into just a nice isolated chunky riff, then into the groovy section. Again, very akin to Obituary. I mean, I know Terry Butler's in there, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here that sounds like Obituary. And then this song takes some interesting kind of turns. It'll shift right into like thrash metal, kind of like Jungle Rot playing their own version of like SOD's Sergeant D. And that can describe a good chunk of this album. There are a lot of songs that pretty much just kind of fall in line with that structure. Like out of nowhere, you'll get like a big thrashy section. There's tons of groove on here. There's lots of D beats. This is all about like good, straightforward moshers. Much like the Molder album that I just went over, the whole vibe about this is just kind of them having fun. Like, let's just have fun with this. Let's write songs that inspire people to fucking move, and let's not even think about anything else. Let's just kind of just get them going. And I think it's that thrashy vibe that really kind of stokes up the energy, especially on songs like Recycled Hate and Fence Walker. Those songs just kind of come out swinging. They stay really fast. Recycled Hate has some sick, fast riff work on it. I love the fact that guitars really drive the song, like stay ferocious the entire time. You get some cool dive bombs here and there. There's good groovy breakdowns, but mostly it's just very fast and in your face. Frontman and drummer Jermaine King does a really good job on here. Straightforward, in the pocket drumming for the most part, but I think his vocal presence is really cool. But again, this is where I have some issues with the production because his vocals are very dry. Again, there's just like some moments on there I think they could use a little bit more reverb. I know there are a couple songs where they do put a couple of filters on his voice and it kind of breaks up a little bit because he has a very straightforward delivery. Like it's kind of that, I don't know, universal delivery. It's somewhere between death metal, thrash metal, and hardcore. But the important part is it's constantly aggressive. It constantly just kind of delivers a nice bite and adds to the intensity of the songs. And of course, there's tons of old school death metal all over here. Caustic Vomit Reveries, which is just an interesting title. I don't really know exactly what it means, but it's pretty cool sounding. And Wound Collector, which that's a hell of a fucking hobby too. Both of them kind of latch onto that really early death metal sound. I mean, definitely a lot of Leprosy. I mean, the ties to Terry Butler are kind of coming from all directions here, but also some of the griminess of an album like Slowly Rot too. But you also get a lot of hardcore nods or like hardcore energy in these songs too. Like even during the breakdowns, there's like a little bit more of a hardcore bite to them. It kind of reminds me of like a death metal version of Power Trip or Enforced. Like, it just kind of has that extra thrashy bite and kind of that pissed off attitude, but it has, like, you know, death metal's more sinister and ugly side. This whole album really just latches on to an old school vibe, and it kind of works against it in a way, because honestly, it kind of feels like a tribute almost to just old school metal in general. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily the whole, you know, thing behind this band. I think it's, you know, just a straightforward new project and they want to kind of forge their own sound. But man, this really relies on the tropes of all that old school stuff. And it's good because these are tropes I love. These are the tropes I grew up with. In fact, if I had heard this album when I was in my teenage years, this would be another thing that just kind of launched me further into the metal maelstrom that I currently live in. But because of that firm grip on the late 80s and early 90s that they have, a lot of this kind of feels like retread. There's not a lot of modern stuff to really sort of spice it up or kind of make it stand on its own. They really stick to that tried and true formula, which is, you know, again, true. I said that part, but definitely tried. Like, you've definitely heard a lot of this stuff before. A lot of this I would compare to Gruesome. But the thing about Gruesome is it's very transparent in being a death tribute band. Even going as far as saying, yeah, we just essentially just reworked death songs and kind of made them into, you know, our own, kind of. But I mean, again, this is intended to sound as close to death as possible. And I feel like this is kind of the same, except for maybe a number of bands, again, namely Obituary, obviously I would say Massacre in there too, and definitely Death. Like, there's a lot of Leprosy nods in here with the tremolo riffs, some of the more crawling riffs in here, and then, you know, just straight up death thrash. And uniformly it works. It's all done really well. It's just, I feel like you get a lot of repetition of the same tropes throughout the entire album. There's not really a lot of variety on here, which is really sad, because overall, I don't dislike any tracks on here, but I felt like I was getting a lot of the same stuff listening to this from track to track. And the songs are structured in such a way that, honestly, some of them within the first 20 seconds, I feel like you're gonna hear every riff that is in the remainder of the song. Occasionally you'll get, like, you know, a little bit longer bridge with a little bit longer lead, but most of the time the leads are very short, you know, kind of melodic, mostly a lot of dive bombs, but you know, it's just sort of there. Like, it's just that, all right, well, we have to have this moment, and now we're on to this next part, which we kind of repeated earlier. And there's a lot of issues with transitions on here. Like, a lot of these songs like to open up with a big groovy section. Some of them take right off, but generally they're in a hurry to get to the next part, and that was kind of my issue. Sometimes it really hurts the flow of a song. Case in point, King Khan. This song opens up with actually one of the few more softer moments on here with a nice acoustic sort of build up, and then it goes full tilt into thrash metal, and it is fucking gunning. It's going fucking hard. I really was getting into it, and then it just kind of shoehorns in this little groovy section that's like a pre-chorus, and unfortunately it feels like they're just slamming on the brakes just to squeeze in a section that's, I mean, okay, it kind of takes away from it, and then it goes right back to the fast stuff. I kind of wish there were some songs in here that kind of stayed uniform maybe to one particular vibe, like have a fast, aggressive one that doesn't bother with a ton of groove, or just have one that's just a groovy banger, maybe have one that's decidedly slower. It feels like they're kind of just, you know, making sure they incorporate every aspect of their sound into every song versus having, all right, this song stand out versus this song stand out because they're decidedly different. That is kind of the issue where the songs start to run into each other. And as much as we like to bring up dry humping a riff on here, which we absolutely love, a lot of the time I feel like they don't dry hump some of them long enough. I feel like they have like a counter in their head where they have to switch, or they feel they need to switch. And sometimes it would just be cool to see them take a riff and sort of build on it, like add a cool melody or a harmony on top of it, kind of just rock it out a little bit before switching. And it's usually a switch between a groovy section to a thrashy section. That formula is just kind of all over here. And again, while I like it, it gets repetitious really early on. The song Hallucid feels like it could just be a straightforward groovy banger, like, you know, very much akin to something you would hear on Obituary's Cause of Death, but it keeps trying to shoehorn in these little thrashy sections to break it up. And honestly, at this point, I just think it needs to truck along at one speed, because these little transitions, after a while, it just kind of takes you out of it. And granted, you can kind of see them coming, but I don't know, like, at the same time, it kind of hurts the flow of the song. Like, maybe I wanted something a little bit more basic here just to sort of break up the pace, because the pace is kind of uniform on here. Now, I will say the song Fence Walker I think is particularly strong because I think it stays very intense for a good chunk of it. It has a good stomping intro, it builds it up well. I think they could have built it up a little bit longer, but it's kind of back to the whole dry humping thing. But when it takes off into the thrashy section, it feels way more biting. It has a great fucking riff behind it. The vocals kind of take on a little bit more aggressive, faster cadence, and it just sort of dials up the energy. But the thing that made it really stand out, and honestly I think it's the only moment like this in this entire album, is they shift hard to like almost a doomy, sinister breakdown in here, and it's absolutely awesome. Honestly, I could have used a little bit more of that on this album just because it was something different. Now this comes at track 8 out of 9. And at this point, I was like, man, I've heard a lot of rinse and repeat. And granted, I like these fucking, things they're repeating. It's just getting a little bit old. But having something like this to sort of spice it up, just to show they have a little bit more in their wheelhouse other than just a lot of old school death metal and thrash metal worship, really made it stand out. Like, it's great. I like the dreary leads on it. It's a complete mood shift. And while I loved it, it also made me realize that, man, this album is kind of missing some, dynamics. It's missing some stuff to sort of make it more than just worship and tribute. Which honestly, it's kind of weird because you have a guy in the band that's been a huge force in old school death metal for so long with Terry Butler, and I have tremendous fucking respect for him. The dude's fucking awesome. But at the same time, I feel like this is just a little too close to, like, literally every band that he's been in. I think when Rat God came out, like, it really captured our interest in terms of the metal community, because I know that album got a lot of rave reviews. I love the sound of it. Again, fiercely old school, kept things very simple, very minimalist, but very powerful. And I think they kind of just did the same thing on here, and this kind of feels like retread from the last album. Granted, again, I don't have a problem with any single song, just it's the overall vibe of it. I feel like we heard this before in two aspects, both from this band and both from bands in the past that, are definitely huge influences. So honestly, if you own Rat God, I think you 100% know what to expect. And if you really liked Rat God, you're probably going to like this too, but I mean, it is going to sound, very similar to it. Maybe a little bit more intense in some spots, maybe a little bit more melodic in some spots, but overall, it's very similar. But again, there was no part of this that I really disliked. Again, this is kind of similar to the Molder album. Like, I liked the entire thing. It was fun to listen to. Like, it's got some great fucking riffs. It's just kind of repeating a lot of the same stuff over and over again, and it might be just a little bit long for what it is. Now, the CD version of this does include a cover of Metallica's Whiplash, which unfortunately I wasn't able to jam, but I mean, I imagine if these guys are this good at old school stuff, that's gonna sound fucking amazing. I believe there's also a version that has a Benediction cover on it too. But I wasn't able to throw those in on this review. I was just able to go over the 9 tracks that are all originals, and overall, it's pretty decent. So I'm going to go ahead and give this 3 stars. Again, for as repetitious as it is, it's very enjoyable. Like, it's just latched onto that old school sound. I just wish it would do more. And the fact that it teases doing a little bit more. Again, Fence Walker, fucking killer song. Recycled Hate, high energy all the time. But I mean, again, you get a lot of the same stuff on here, and while it's very enjoyable, especially if you love old school death metal like Obituary and Massacre and Death and all that shit, it does feel a bit recycled. I mean, honestly, I didn't expect like a huge growth in terms of like this album's gonna sound vastly different than their first one. But at the same time, I kind of wanted to hear maybe a few more new tricks on there, or maybe just a few like different songwriting dynamics or something. But again, this is a lot of the same stuff, but it's a good same, so I can't really knock it that much. If you are a diehard old school death metal fan and old school thrash and you like fucking hardcore, you're gonna dig this. If you like Massacre, Obituary, Bolt Thrower, Power Trip, any of that shit, I'm pretty sure you're gonna dig this. It's a giant dose of nostalgia for a lot of us old heads, and for the new ones, it's some pretty cool fucking metal. So yeah, definitely check this one out. So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there'll be a link down below. There will also be a link down there to thrallsofmetal.com if you would like to get one of our kick-ass shirts. And as for Denver Death Fest, again, we're going to make an announcement soon, or we already have, I don't know. Like I said, that's more on Miller and John in terms of making the announcement, because they made the first one and I'm going to let them do it again. So yeah, it's either here or it's coming. And well, for those that don't know, this will take place September 30th through October 2nd in Denver, where the Death Fest is, because it's Denver Death Fest. I believe the lineup is completely full. I think we have roughly 30 bands. It's gonna be a good fucking time. There's gonna be a lot of metal. We'll be there hanging out, watching bands. Come by, say hi, have a beer with us, have 8 beers with us. I don't know, wherever the night takes us. Either way, we are looking forward to seeing you guys there. And of course, thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, liking, all that stuff. Again, it has been such an awesome ride. It's just been a lot of fucking fun to do this. You know, as much as I love listening to music, I like listening to music and then sharing it with you guys. That has become something I look forward to doing every week or virtually every day because the rate of videos we put out, yeah, it's pretty fucking high, isn't it? But yeah, our success is because of you guys, and thank you so fucking much. And with that, we will catch you later.